Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Hey Patterson, I'm good. We've got it a bit warm and steamy here over in Geelong near Melbourne.
Well, we're in a northwest, southeaster, wester here. It's
Does that
it's
mean it's
huge.
going around? You got a cyclone going, have you?
It's coming from all directions, and no matter which way you ride your bike, you're in a headwind. So it's one of those days. And
Well, you need to go in the opposite direction, then you'd have a tailwind.
yeah, if I can figure it out. Uh, we do have at least 15 hours of daylight though, so that's good.
You
And
get used to it.
yeah.
So you've got a really good response to your video, your short video this week. Tell us about the basic topic because I thought that was a good one to dive into.
Oh, thanks. Well, the video was because I woke up thinking about the holiday season and the challenges that people face with food in general, and all the other things that come around the holidays, the work starting and stopping, the financial pressures, the relationship pressures. You know, you're with people you want to be with, or you're with people you don't want to be with, and it's just it's a very stressful time of the year. And just like the economic barometer says, well, this is where the biggest activity is, I think the stress barometer says that too. So my little 2 3 minute video was called Tethering Consciousness, pulling it in. And because I think it's the only thing that's going to get us through this so that we're happy. And that's the whole point. And we're healthy and that we're not slumped over in a food coma, or that we actually feel great and even better at the end of the holiday season than we do at the beginning. So when you think about what it is, like in the States, they had Thanksgiving, and now Thanksgiving is always on the last Thursday of in November, and then it's a Friday holiday, and then they get a Saturday and a Sunday, so it's a great 4 day holiday, non-denominational. There's no religion involved. It's just Thanksgiving, and
Yeah.
everybody, families come together and they feast. Okay, this is the time when my family, the Southworth family that came on the Mayflower, were starving, and the Indian tribes fed them. It had a big, and they said, thanks for giving. This will be forever in our memory of the how you saved our lives, of giving us this food in this day when things were looking pretty bleak. And so from that idea of charity and sharing came this beautiful holiday. And it's quite common for people to go work in soup kitchens, to look after their neighbors, bring in those people that may be on their own, and they're church members or things like that, they know are isolated. So it's a really lovely convivial time of the year. But then there's the thing about the food, and of course, just as America can consume half to three-quarters of all the consumables, they they go to town on Thanksgiving too. And it's generally a turkey stuffing, a sweet potato pie, all kinds of things, cranberry sauce, uh, scallop potatoes, um, desserts, nut cakes, Christmas cakes, those types of things. And it just goes on and on and on. Mashed potatoes, and oh gosh, roast vegetables. Oh yes, don't forget the
And
roast vegetables.
alcohol.
Yeah, yeah, that's alcohol, wasn't it? Yeah, but and like it goes, and people just overconsume, and then they fall down in front of the TV and they watch something and they fall asleep and they nap and they get up and they nibble for that night, because you don't need just anything else to eat the rest of the day. And the next day, they make meals and sandwiches out of the leftovers and things like that. Meatloaf sandwich, turkey sandwich, all this stuff, pumpkin pie. All these things are traditional, but it revolves around food and overconsumption. So it got me to think, and that was is that what makes us want to do that to ourselves?
You mean it's voluntary?
it's like if you think about the outcome, it's kind of stupid to begin. Okay. And how many situations do we have the Christmas do for the work associates? We go to our clubs and then go for our Christmas dinners and things like that. How many are in celebration and include excess, the concept? And so I was thinking, I say, well, what we really want is connection. What we really want is to be with
Just
our
before you go there, but it makes sense historically when there wasn't a lot of food around, that when there was a celebration, it wasn't literally a feast. It was the things we didn't normally have. But what's shifted is now we've actually got access to that all of the time. So it's no longer just so when it was a feast, it was like, oh wow, look at all this food. We don't normally get it. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. Or I'm going to try that. But now when we can have that all the time, that mentality doesn't work. That's the falling over point.
Well, I think there may be a genetic uplink there for what we did, for the several dozen millennia previously. When there was food, we wanted to fatten ourselves up because it was the guaranteed reproductive potency. We could have offspring. We could survive another season, and it was not much beyond that. So when we come into this zone of continual excess, feasting with greater feasting, feasting with greater feasting, feasting with greater feasting, not feasting, not one month, 1 week of feasting, and then 4 lean weeks or 6 lean weeks, and then another. No, it's not like that. We continually go on and on and on, and that does a number of things to our blood sugar, to our insulin sensitivity, to our cortisol levels. And that's just the food component. But then we have the social pressures. But I believe that people really want connection around the holidays. And when they eat, they want to join the tribe and they do what the tribe does. If the tribe's going to sit there and dance, everybody dances, right? You get up and you become part of it. If you sit at a table for 3 hours and keep eating and talking and eating and talking, you sit at the table and eat and talk for 3 hours. That's the ritual. And so we have to consciously rein in what we're actually doing there, keep sipping our water and eating a few grapes and not having the caloric excess so that after this monumental gathering, we can have some uh, metabolic clarity that our bodies aren't going to say, "Hey, ooh, that was a real challenge." You just did a cardiac stress test. You just did a diabetes test on me. You just did all kinds of stuff, and we're cramming it in. We're actually stretching your liver as you speak. We're throwing fat into your liver. There's a bunch of things that are going on. So when we just slow it down and say, I'm here for the people. It's great. And I'm going to consciously eat. I know before I sit down how much my body needs. And I'm going to look at the plate and know that that's what's going to go in, not the second plate and the third plate and the nibbles in between.
Mm.
And so that to me is there. But we have this other part too. And I think we talked about it previously where we have these food additives and these food flavorings. And these food flavorings, besides the sugar, salt, and fat, which are relatively high in our holiday foods, these food flavorings that come out of packaged contents in soups and packaged spices and canned conglomerations that add to the flavors. Those all spark different parts of your brain to get you into that addictive craving cycle. So it's like um, you just have this absolute cocaine high. And it's like, woo, that was great. That tasted so good. And you don't want it to stop. And so you just keep the hand then detaches. It becomes its automatic. Because the little brain in the hand goes and it keeps feeding without thinking. And that's where the habits begin. But when we consciously take our time, chew our food, and go through the process of being present when we're eating and being present to all the people around us, And oftentimes it's a bit gross to watch other people eat. Okay. You know, they're talking with their mouth open, they're doing this, they're not thinking about it.
Spitting food all over the.
Food all over, chicken flying everywhere around the plane. It's like it's like, oh gosh, do they're not there. They're somewhere outside their body. And so we get this chance. And I think that so when we tether in this consciousness, we have two things that happens. We get to feel better, number one. Number two, we haven't detracted from the social engagement at all. Number three, we're probably going to be on detail cleaning dishes because we're the only ones that's still standing, right? But it's ours to serve, and that's the point. So uh, when people just slow down and participate, things change. Now we did a retreat with 14 people where we did a whole foods fasting mimicking diet. And it was a 7-day retreat, and it was a 5-day fast. So the day they came was the introductory day, we had a normal meal, 5 days of fasting, and then a day and a half of normal food again before everybody left. And in that, once we got into our fast, whole foods fasting mimicking diet, which we start off with about 1,000 calories a day, our breakfast was a salad. It's like, ooh, that's different. Ooh, where's my Cocoa Puffs? Not that anybody eats Cocoa Puffs, but I'm sure some do. Um, and we made a little rule. It was salads in silence. So you just had to sit around this table, and everybody sat around the same table. It was a big table. And it was like, it was so hard for people because they went, no, no. And the other exercise was to chew the food till it was a liquid and the taste was gone. Because we know that when we chew food down to what our teeth are designed to do is create this certain size of a mush that doesn't slice and dice like a wolf. It mashes and grinds and mashes and grinds, and it breaks open the chlorophyll in the plants, kind of like an egg yolk, like a soft boiled egg. It's like a blue, and that chlorophyll oozes out, and you have massive amounts of uh, nutrient exposure as you swallow. And now it's much easier for your digestive tract to take in that nutrient exposure and pull the fats, carbohydrates, and proteins out of it. And what's left is the fiber, which is, of course, brilliant for your biome. And as it goes through the small intestine for, it's like 6 or 7 meters, it's like there's not a lot of bacteria in there. So in that zone, as you have these little microvilli sitting up, and this mush is going through it. And think of the mush as kind of coming through in the colors of the food that you had. And by the time it gets to the end of the small intestine, it's pretty much just brown, all right, from the bile salts. And all those colors have gone out of it because those are the vitamins and minerals and polyphenols and yeah, anthocyanins and all these different colored things that come out of our foods, which are our protective mechanisms that support our metabolism. And
I,
then,
I heard a great line. I think it's a Buddhist one, but it was like chew your water or chew your fluids and drink your food. And it
yeah,
kind of fits into what you're saying. It's like chewing your food enough so it almost becomes water or liquid. But also, you're not just gulping water down, you're actually chewing the water as well, as if you were chewing the water, just to slow down the whole process. I thought that was a beautiful way of saying it.
it is, and as it goes along through the digestive tract in this new form, which is completely ch cho chewed, completely chewed, not chewing, uh, completely chewed in the right mechanical state. When it gets down to the small intestine, of course, to the large intestine, the bacteria can then be easily digesting this, as opposed to taking more time. If there's too much, if you just chomp, chomp, and swallow, you're going to have gas, bloating, these types of things, which are created by it takes time. And as transient time slows down, the simple sugars that are still tagging along, they can ferment. And this is a fermentive digestive process anyway. So our little beer making belly down there, it basically is going to ferment and break down the food, the carbohydrate even further, which is our last of our soluble and our insoluble starches. So that gives us back more vitamins, more minerals, more energy in the form of short chain fatty acids, which help the gut wall be even more vibrant. Now, that's all fine for an anatomy lesson, what's going on, but at the end of the day, what's it mean? It means that those that have the slowest chewing get the most amount of exposure to nutrients. And in epidemiology, we've seen many studies that show people who take longer eating live longer, even though they might have a crappier diet. And the example was the Norwegians and the French. The French from the foie gras portion of France where they have the goose liver pate, and the Norwegians who have a very high uh, cheese, dairy, fatty diet. And the thing was is that the Norwegians had the highest heart attack rate in Europe. The French had the lowest. So what's the paradox here? They had both had the pretty identical fats, carbohydrates, and protein profiles, but one and pretty much similar amount of saturated fats and their amount of, it's like, what's going on here? What they finally found out was the French took 40 minutes to eat, 40 minutes, and the Norwegians took 8.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like Homer Simpson.
And
Did the French also do more social eating? Like they didn't eat alone? Was that a factor or was that something else?
well, the French always have made, the table as a congregation place, and it's
Mm,
why it takes longer. There's no rush. You
yeah.
know, there's no rush at a business lunch. You do the things you do. And so what they did, Norway did something very, very good. They said, look, you guys, or your diet is completely out of sorts, and we need to address this. So for the last 30 years, they've been saying, okay, more grains, more beans, less milk, less cheese, less meat. And they've pulled it around that way. And the French have kept going as the French have gone, but the thing about the French also is they tend not to overeat.
Mm.
Okay, when you take longer, you absorb more, you're satiated quicker. It still takes the same amount of time to tell your brain, I'm not hungry anymore. But if you have the hand doing the work, you don't get the message until you've eaten your second meal at the same sitting. And your
Yeah.
calories are racking up, going ding, 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 ding. So uh, when we take our time, when we do that in a environment that's conducive to digestion, as opposed to I got a deadline, I'm doing this, I'm eating at my desk, I'm doing that. That's not going to work. Okay. So again, tethering in that consciousness about what's going on around you, like Chinese medicine, never eat when you're upset. Okay. Why is that? Because cortisol turns on your sympathetic nervous system, shuts down your digestive tract, and puts all your sugar in your brain
Ah, is it?
all your sugar in your brain so you can figure out what the threat is and deal with it and put your blood into your muscles, not in your digestive tract. So from those two things alone, you can say, uh, sorry, you just got to put that off. From those two things alone, it's like we've got to an opportunity every time we sit down and eat to take care of ourselves. And it's amazing what happens with your energy, with the amount, there's no slumps and bumps when you do this. The more you chew your food, the more even your blood sugar will be, unless you're chewing a candy bar. But you know, uh, it's an amazing thing that I've seen in my life. And our group, by the fourth or fifth day, they were just going, we really enjoy this silent time where we're chewing our food, and it really has made us conscious and more perspective of what we've been doing and reflective of what we've been doing in our life. So,
And
um,
look, and it fits the philosophy of lifestyle medicine, meaning that it's about this whole thing. It's not just, it's not this piece of orange that I'm going to whack in my mouth here. It's what's the context I'm sitting in, whether it's social or my relationship to time, which could be related to stress, or it's not eating when you're upset, because that's kind of that bigger context. And I also hear that it's like there's multiple digestion levels. And the first one's in the mouth when the saliva and the like does something. And then I don't know what the next ones are, but it's other than just throwing it down the hole and let the gut sort it out. There's actually method to this madness about this whole way this body's been evolved.
well, it's really interesting. If you take somebody and you do them a water fast for 3, 4, 5 days, and I know from experience, the moment you put that orange in your mouth after not eating, and you take chomp chomp, it's like somebody walked over to the light switch and turned your body on again. It was like, "What?"
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, and it can't happen that quick. It can't regulate your blood sugar that quick. But neurochemicals in your mouth, you absorb through the sides of your cheeks some of these sugars. You have enzymes in your parotid glands that actually help you digest carbohydrate. And so it's a very rapid response. And you don't have to swallow it down and get it down to the jejunum. It's the duodenum. It's like it happens very quickly. So yeah, every phase is important, but we get the majority of our calories out of our food is in that first meter and a half. And that's where all the heavy duty work is done in the stomach, getting the acids secreted when the food stimulation comes in, churning it around, breaking it apart, and then flushing it into the duodenum. And that's when we secrete bile salts and pancreatic enzymes to break apart the molecules of fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. And through that process, in the next, you know, 2 feet, we absorb all those things very quickly.
well, the other one I'd heard was, and I used to do this, I used to have the big blender with all my fruits and veg and go, aren't I wonderful, putting them all in there. But because I was chopping them up and then pouring it down as a liquid, I wasn't absorbing much of it. That's accurate or?
Yes and no. You will absorb, what you need to absorb, but I think it's far better to go through the old school stuff of chewing than it is to go through 10,000 RPMs of blending, which fractionates your food into, I guess, microscopic pieces sometimes. So while blending is better than juicing, because in juicing, of course, you lose the fiber.
Yeah.
Uh, and blending is not bad. We put people on some blended concoctions, fresh fruits and juices. The Gerson therapy, let's say, the 52% remission rate from cancer in the 1930s of all cancers. How did he
Wow.
do that? He gave people 8 glasses a day of blended juice of beet, liver, carrot, spinach, and they drank it as they sat by a swimming pool in the sunshine in
Mm.
Southern California. So they de-stressed, they got hypernutrients back, and their body and lower calories too. Okay, so this calorically kept them in a zone. They weren't overeating, and they did very well. So when you are in a normal dietary exposure, as are most people, to ultra processed foods, hyper palatable foods, which have just the right mix of sugar, salt, and fat and flavorings that make you go, "Ooh, that's me," which ends up being 60% or more of the calories that most people consume. It's like when you're in that environment, you can't be anything but nutrient deficient. Your body just has to say, well, there's not enough nutrients in this. I need more calories. I need more calories. I need more calories. So now we're eating 3,500 calories a day, and we have 70% obesity, and it's like that's not gonna work in the long term. So what do we do about it? Well, we just come back to food that's not processed. And this is where the carnivore diet is spectacular. It's one stupid food group that has no ultra processed foods in it. That's the only reason it works. The fact that it has a 27% death rate within 5 years from all-cause mortality. What a quote I heard yesterday talking to a colleague in California who just cited the latest study. These people, they have seen the religious right in one sense because, without processed food, their bodies feel much better. The fact that they're still hyponutrient means they're stopping at McDonald's and getting 8 burger patties, as I saw this one guy do with no bread and just eating the burger patties, which are 65% fat. I mean, come on. Wild venison might be 4 to 8% fat of lean meat. It's like it's not right. It's not right. It's just not right. But so what we come back to is that these organizations of primarily a plant-based diet radically change your caloric intake because you can't eat 3,500 calories of spinach. It'll take up the whole room. Not really, but it'll feel like a half a bale of food. I mean, in fact, do this as an experiment. I challenge anybody to go out and get 5 big carrots and a tub of hummus and eat the 5 carrots. Okay, it will take you half hour, 45 minutes. Your jaws will be sore. And that's pretty much a half of a cheeseburger for calories. That's only because of the tahini and the hummus if you buy it off the shelf, you know. Yeah, and it's a little bit oily. So I mean, it's ridiculous. And of course, the carotenoids, the night vision, all of these things, the skin, the beta carotenes, helping every tissue in your body. Phenomenal, phenomenal. It's like when people's skin turn orange from eating too many carrots, we think, oh gosh, no, that's actually how people look when they're healthy. There's a little bit of an orange glow to them.
And you're not talking about Donald Trump here, are
That's not the color I'm thinking.
you?
No. So it's an interesting topic, and I think that people have the power within them just to use the strongest muscles in their body, which is their thumbs, and push the plate away. Push it
So,
away.
what would you recommend for people for, let's say Christmas is coming up and probably for next year for Thanksgiving? What would you recommend as a strategy going into that meal?
Well, first off, let's talk about how those meals happen. A lot of times they're potlucks, there's like bring a plate, and bring the food that you like to eat.
Ah, there you go. There's an
Okay.
out.
So you can whack on a bunch of your own food, so you're not going to go hungry, and then you can look around and take your pick of whatever else looks pretty good, and that's the number one thing. The number two thing is that go for the fresh first. Always go to the fresh food. When I used to teach my gazillionaires in Aspen how to survive all the eating out that they did around the world in restaurants and stuff, it was basically you go for fresh first. You always put something fresh and savory in your mouth. And this is the latest research also. Go for the savory food. It doesn't spike your blood sugar. and don't drink yet. Say, I'm really thirsty. I need a glass of water. Get a glass of water, start sipping at that. If you're going to have some wine or a beverage like that, have it with the meal so it slows down its spiking of the sugar. Then that's great. When you're eating your meal, you eat your greens, live food first, whatever it is. Then you go to your protein. And if you're eating beef, chicken, all that stuff, go for that. But if you're like me, you're going for the beans, the tofu, the grains, those things like that. The next thing you would go for was the vegetables, and again, more fiber, more slower release. And then lastly, we would go for the grains again. But it's like savory, fresh green food first, protein second, vegetables third. Okay. Green, fluffy, protein, vegetables third, then grains. And when you do it that way, you really smooth out that thing. Let's say we go glass of wine, protein. Glass of wine spikes the thing. You've been sipping water. Now you get your meal. You've finally taken a sip of you've taken you've had your salad or whatever there was similar to that. Maybe with some spinach or things like that. You've had that. You've had the greens. Then you've started with some protein, and you start to have a little sip of wine. Then, and it radically blunts that, brings that blood sugar curve down. So those are strategies to get through that. And of course, at the end of the meal, you have your dessert. You don't start with the bonbons before the meal and the wine. It's like, oh my God, that's suicide. That's getting your body's insulin so high to try to keep you out of a coma that that you are here you are. Your body's going, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then here comes the next course. And he's going, I got to do it again. I got to do it again. I got to do it again. And so what happens is over the course of 5 hours, you made your body highly insulin resistant. And that makes it your blood sugar higher. It makes your insulin, makes your storage of fat, carbohydrates, and proteins as fat in your body much, much higher. And pretty much all the food you're going to eat is going to end up as fat. And if you don't believe me, take a little pinch of your belly before you eat, and take a little pinch afterwards, and you're going, the pinch is bigger. How is that? And it's like, well, I feel that your body just throws it out there when you overeat, and because it has to put it somewhere. And if we have your favorite little love handle wherever it's at, find it and give it a check and say, I'm feeling pretty good right now. It's great, but I'm going into this Christmas dinner. I'll check that tonight, see how I feel, or in the morning, see how.
Mm. And as you've said, the food coma or the need for sleep, not like half an hour later, is kind of a pretty good sign you've eaten too much and possibly the wrong stuff as well.
Exactly. And we try to go, the best dessert for dinner is a nice walk. Okay.
Yeah.
And that again drops the blood sugar a little bit, the digestion slows a little bit. It gives us time between the meal and between the bedtime and for evening meals. And that's really, really good because it takes us 3 or 4 hours to really calm down that digestion. So when we do go to sleep, we kind of feel like we did before dinner. We're not hungry, but now we're not hungry, we're satiated. And the next big event is nodding off to sleep, as opposed to, oh, I ate too much, and go back and you fall into, it's like, I can't believe I ate the whole thing, right? It's like, no, it's just, you think about it again, tethering in that consciousness and say, I have the ability to control this myself. And as a result,
Really the take home, isn't it? It's like paying attention to what's going into your mouth, rather than just blindly eating.
yeah, and there's other little things that you can do, like having a glass of water with just a tablespoon of vinegar in it before your meal. Okay,
What
now
does that do?
that radically blunts your blood sugar spike.
Oh,
So That's an interesting one, and particularly for people who have blood sugar issues. How do you know you have blood sugar issues? Well, not what is it? 20% of the population is diabetic, and 60% of the population is pre-diabetic or diabetic, and they just don't know it.
That's
So,
almost everybody.
yeah, so it's like there's 3 times as many people that are in the zone as are conscious of it. And so odds are greater than 1 out of 2 that you or me or somebody listening to this is pushing that prediabetes zone pretty hard. And they're the ones that eat, slumber, eat, get hyper, eat, have to eat, keep my energy up, have to eat, keep my energy up. And if I go too long without eating, I can't eat that because it's going to make me sleepy. These are things that are saying, oh, this isn't this, the body's not handling your energy metabolic uh, equation properly because it's been stressed. And the best way out of that is, again, like I said, uh, keeping the fluffy food in the diet, the whole food in the diet. And whole food has a complete wrapper on it. Don't is The glucose goddess says, don't eat any naked food, you know. Yeah, food that's devoid of its covering, like polished white rice or white flour or things like that. Don't do that because it'll radically think that. Let's take a piece of toast, the innocuous piece of toast. We all like a good piece of toast, but let's talk about what it is. Toast is made generally from a wheat berry. A wheat berry, that kernel is taken, and if you look at the wheat berry itself, it's like a bowl of rice. It's like brown rice. It's a grain, okay? And so you take this little wheat berry and you look at it, and if you ate it, it'd have a glycemic index of maybe 5 or 10. It releases sugar very slowly because it's a complex little nut, so to speak, a critter. And yet, what do? We put it under a big steel crusher and we crush it. In the old days, we stone ground it, which the stones weren't molecularly smooth. They would crush it partly, kind of like what we do when we chew. They just kind of like masticate it. And they would make a powder out of it, but it would be a lumpy kind of powder because the reason being is it had all of its constituents in there. It wasn't white flour, it was brown flour, and that brown flour had the oils of the wheat germ in it.
Mm.
And that those oils of the wheat germ means that, oh, you had to make this stuff fresh. Otherwise, if you put it in a little bag and you set it on the shelf, 4 or 5 weeks it'd go off. It'd go rancid. So thus, white flour, you could put it up there and come back you on the Starship Enterprise and still have a feed, 10 years later, 20 years later, because it didn't go off. It was a sterilized food. So now we go from this 5 or 10 BMI, we break it down into this flour. If we ate that flour, it'd have a glycemic index probably 10 times higher, 40, 50. All right. But we're not done. We're making bread here. Okay. We're going to make that toast. So what do? We get some yeast that really love this complex carbohydrate that's starting to show some of its molecules like this because they've been smashed. And we feed it yeast and we just give them a little touch of sugar to make them. And within 15 minutes, when we mix that up, the bowl is frothing. We've gone from 200 million to 2 billion yeast in that bowl, and they're breaking down these constituent molecules of starch into simple sugars because that's what they eat. Like us, they love glucose, okay? Sucrose and fructose, and they love that. And so as they break it down even further, we go just to the right point, and then we stop that process by because the bread's expanding, right? As the bread is rising, and then we punch it down, let it do it again, so even more, more complete. And then we stick it in the oven at 275 to 350, depending on what you're doing. And we stop the yeast, we kill the yeast off, but we continue with the molecular heat to break the molecules apart. Now we smell the dead yeast and we smell some of the broken sugar molecules, and it smells lovely, doesn't it? Nothing like baked bread, right? That's how you sell a house.
That's how you sell a house.
That's right. As everybody starts salivating, and even if as I'm talking here, are you salivating? I am.
I
And so
want some toast.
Yeah, and so and then so there it is. It's done. There's your bread, and it's a BMI. It's got a glycemic index of about 100 now. So that really is phenomenal when you think about whole foods are generally a glycemic index, 20 to 50 in that zone. All right. So now we're twice that. But what's available out of that slice of bread is broken down starch into sugar. And if we take that sugar as a calculatable amount of sugar available, but we're not done. We're going to put it in the toaster and do it again. Okay. And we're going to break down some more things. And we're getting probably anywhere from 4 to 6 teaspoons of sugar out of that one piece of toast before we put the jam on it. Okay. Before we put the condiments on it. And so it's an interesting thing. So now just the toast can bump the blood sugar quite
I've never
dramatically.
related to that as sugars. I always thought it was pretty low quality carbs, but um, I suppose that's what you get when you do drill the carbs down so low. It basically comes back to a sugar effectively. In terms of the way, we're talking the way it gets absorbed into the bloodstream.
Yeah, exactly. And it gets absorbed quickly and it spikes blood sugar. And as a
Yeah.
result, it makes you respond by either having more of it, a second slice of toast, that third slice of toast, that half a loaf of toast, whatever it is, and because it just like it feeds that thing and it stabilizes it with whatever else you're putting on the toast. But the point is, it's a processed food. Not that there's not good breads, good Roggenbrot and Schwarzbrats and all those German breads that are heavy and the rye breads, you know, but they only eat a little piece, okay? And, most of the things that they put on those are quite savory, pickles and tomatoes and pâtés and all these other things, but they don't eat a lot. If you,
Mhm.
little cheeses, but, they eat a small amount, not a large amount. So that's the point. Eating a small amount is the best protection against all the chronic degenerative diseases. If we looked at Sachin Panda at Scripps, looked at people, tens of thousands of people's eating habits, and what he realized, he says it didn't really matter if you ate kind of crappy, if you didn't overeat and you kept a normal body weight and you were like you were minimally active, you had about the same chance of not having chronic disease as somebody who was very good with their diet, eating a plant-based diet, so forth and so on. And that's contrary to what we think. It's like, well, I think,
Well, there's your golden rule for Christmas or Thanksgiving. Eat
yeah,
less than you think you need. That'll, you know, get you through better than almost everything.
yeah, yeah, and exactly. And so you go back for seconds on the second day, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's about
Nice, simple rule of thumb. Just eat less than what you think you need and have seconds tomorrow. Um,
yeah. There's always
that way
something.
you can engage with people. You're not looking like the sore thumb or the black sheep of the family because you're engaging with everybody,
Mm.
but you're looking after yourself as well.
I remember my grandparents who are great examples of this. The grandma lived in her late 80s and died of an aneurysm. Grandpa 96, and I never remember them eating on normal plates. They ate on salad plates. little plates, right? So not the big platters. They laid on this, and they just, you know, and they always ate pretty much whole food, and they did eat beans and grains, things like that, and greens. Um, they weren't large meat eaters at all. Um, Pretty interesting when I think about it.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Without opening another can of worms, it's kind of that generation in the middle that kind of lost the plot with the marketing machine that we've got. But that
yeah,
we've kind of mentioned that one.
yeah. We won't
Well, any
go.
thoughts to wrap up? How would you sum up?
Well, basically, back yourself these holidays. Understand that you're eating for you, not for them. And as you said, eat less, and pick the good stuff. Eat savory first. Eat your protein second. Never drink on your own. Drink after you've eaten a little bit. Never go more than two drinks, and nurse it along. Always have an extra glass of water if you've been drinking. These are things that'll help, and always try to get 3 or 4 hours between your meal and your bedtime, and these will allow those tau proteins that get stuck in the brain and start making helping make all these Alzheimer type amyloid deposits that allow them to flush out in the deep sleep of the early morning hours and leave you refreshed the next day. And that's what you want. You want to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And so, and get out for a walk in between your meals. This is or a surf or a bike ride or a game of tennis. Be active and be happy.
Perfect. There's a plan.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers that topic, but there's many ways to talk about this, and I think that each person has to individualize and say, well, what's my takeaway for me? How does my life look? Am I one of those people that just goes in and talks and thinks and drinks and eats and doesn't think about it? You probably are. Most people are. Okay. Because that's our culture that we have been marketed to. It's not like we sit around the table and we have a discussion and a debate and we're there for 2 hours and we slowly nibble on our food because that's not the main reason we're there. You know, no, most of us are get in there, get the job done, and get out of here. We got to still clean the damn kitchen. It's like, oh no, and depending on where you live, most of us aren't even eating at home. We're eating in our, there's a good portion of the US, I think, what's it? I don't know, but it's like 20% eat in their car.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. It was startling, and I'm being conservative with my memory on that, but um, it was a board question a few
And if
years.
people have got questions, they can add them in the comments down below, and we may even take up some of the questions in the future discussion. So we'll see.
Exactly, and I think that in looking at the plethora of all things that we can do for ourselves over the holidays, it's just be kind, be gentle, and chew your food.
Perfect.
With yourself first.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, great to talk to you, Patterson. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jeff. You have a great time and
Thank you.
enjoy those Christmas dues.